Assalamun alaikum. So I wanted to continue on a bit from the last video. I know I kind of done a reintroduction to the archetypes. Um, Spoke mostly about the king and the warrior. I guess what was going through my mind is like understanding the king for masculine psychology and male therapy. It's kind of the that initial not the initial, it's like the king is the center of the masculine psyche. So it's it's like most pathologies and personality disorders fall under the shadow archetypes of the king. So when I reviewed the video, I could tell that that was coming out from the subconscious. So and then I got into the magician. I really underestimated how relevant and how beneficial it would be for my own therapy, like for my own behavior. Understanding the magician and the pathology of the magician, the magus in the psyche. I never know how far and how deep to really start off, Yeah, I spoke a little bit about how the magician comes active in the conscious at a really early age. In most men, most males, the magician is the first to become conscious, right? And he's usually like, these professors have studied, this psychology and psychopathology in almost every culture, literally around the world. They study a lot of West culture, religion, Eastern religion and culture, family culture, tradition, mythology, Asian theology. Like they just study the human mind, and they realize that for most males, the magician comes online in the psyche from 4 to 6, right? You start becoming conscious. Pretty much the magician is, you could say, the most conscious. It's hard to really elaborate on how he's the only, or it's the only conscious archetype. It's more that it's conscious. I say he because it's masculine, It's conscious that once he comes online, he realizes that, quickly realizes that there's other archetypes that are there that should be integrated in the psyche, right? Into the body's behavior. So think about it as, the archetype is really separate from your ego. It's not really part of your personality. He just becomes conscious in the vessel that's carrying him, right? Which is your mind, your human self, little s self, as they refer to it, right? And unfortunately, through most case studies, they realize that in most Western families, even Eastern culture, tradition, that he quickly turns into the shadow at a young age, right? He is not integrated because the king is offline at that age, right? The magician realizes that the power and the consciousness of the king in the psyche has been appropriately handed over, appropriately submitted to the higher magicians within the tribe, right? So the archetypes, they know that our minds still work as primitive, right? This is why the majority of our history was like tribal culture, Western Eastern traditions. It was still tribalism, right? Even through the empires, it's tribalism. All the secular governments, all the monarchies, the patriarchies, it was just all tribalism, right? And within the tribe, there are the spiritual elders, the ones that carry the energy of initiation to pass down, to initiate the young men into adolescence, right? Into maturity. It's an energy that they carry, right? It's a royal energy. It's a royal power that the magician controls, right? So the magician has the wisdom and the know-how of, what to do when it comes to controlling the royal power of the king, okay? And he knows his job. His job is to carry the power in order to be able to have the younger males in the tribe be initiated by handing down the power back to the offspring, to the younger magician that has reached the age of understanding that they have to stop. It's time to start disassociating and disidentifying with the king and the royal archetypes within their tribe, and start consciously relating to them, right? It's maturation, right? It's maturity. This is a process of initiation. It's a ritual process. Now, in the family, they are the parents that carry this energy transference. They call it in the school this idealizing transference, right? That the king, so that the child transfers to the parents, which are the tribal elders, right? Their job is to responsibly hand it back down when the time of initiation happens in the offspring. I say the offspring, it could be the son or the daughter, right, in their life. It's the time of maturity, right? It's initiation. This is the thing, like, this is all pre-modern interpretation, but that's what, all the scientists realize. That's the thing that they all agree on in their conclusions. From the psychologists to the theologians to historians, archaeologists, political scientists, anyone that's really studying the past, human behavior, it doesn't matter what it is, what aspect of our human behavior, they all know that the pre-modern cultures, traditions, understood this way better than modern society, right? They understood the necessity for ritual process. So a lot of because both cultures, the East and the West, are still in. I mean, it's modern culture, right? So our spiritual and tribal elders and our parents never went through that that initial ritual process to be able to have the maturity to be able to know when it is time to pass down the idealizing transference that the child gave to them naturally, right, biologically. So they hold on to it, and then the child grows and stays a child. They never mature. 30, 40, 50, even your parents. If your parents never were handed back down their royal power from their tribal elders and their ritual elders, then they never matured. They're kids. They're grown children. This is the responsibility of the magician, right? He is the sorcerer. So he knows the necessity of these processes and energies, and he knows how necessary it is in order for maturation and individuation for the body, for the mind, and for the identity of the person that they're possessing. You know, to be able to mature and to be able to carry or grow into their individuated true self, right? This is the thing about the archetypes. Even though the magician is the only one that's conscious, they're not human personalities, right? They are separate from our own consciousness. And they too just want to carry themselves and survive. And that's why when they possess a psyche, the person becomes either psychopathic or in a psychotic ritual, a state of ritual process, right? Psychosis. Because the archetypes, they're imperialistic. Each one of the archetypes wants to possess the entire body, the entire self. Each one wants all of you. They want the entire identity. They want your entire personality, right? This is why you have to disidentify with them. You remember I spoke in the video one of the earlier ones where I just first started talking about the archetypes properly. I didn't do a very good job into introducing this theory, you know, in general. I was talking about, you know, being conscious of this divine, eternal, inexhaustible power that you have access to in your subconscious, right? You have access to it. Doesn't mean it's part of your subconscious. I explained it. There's heaps of examples you can really use, like analogies. It's like the mothership, you know? Think about it as like the power station, the power grid, right? It's just been run off an eternal power, right? And it's just a limitless amount of energy. You're plugging in your tiny little circuit into this source, right? Power source. It's like how the professor explains it in the lectures. It's like you're plugging in your little, you know, you have this big industrial circuit, 220,000 volts. You're trying to plug in your little coffee maker, your toaster, you know. You're going to quickly fry out. Like, if you cannot consciously identify and recognize the power and the influence that the archetype is having on your personality and your conscious. See, you're consciously identifying the archetype. You're not identifying with it, because when you're identifying with it, that's subconscious, right? When the archetype possesses you, you are either conscious to its possession, or you're acting out subconsciously. Either way, it's got you. It's identifying with you. Either you're conscious to it, or you're acting out unconsciously. Right? So when the magician is in control, depending on how well, like I said, it knows its superiors, right? Its superior magicians, the superior ritual elders in the family. It knows their role was to hand back the royal power, so that the magician inside you is able to process it and use it to initiate the other archetypes, right? And integrate them. Unfortunately, most families literally in the world, that's not the case, right? The ritual elders never went through that mature process, that ritual process. So the magus inside your brain knows this. Once he recognizes this, then he knows, all right, these spiritual elders kept on to the power for themselves because they never went through the process. Now it's just me. I'm on my own. I've got to survive. I've got to survive in this tribe, right? The way it does that is by becoming its shadow, right? Which is the trickster. The trickster in your psyche, the manipulating, over-exaggerating trickster, right? The Joker. See, I explained in my early video about the archetypes, about the shadow being the trickster, right? I don't know if it was reckless of me to start talking about it before I made so much more progress in understanding, right? But I thought the shadow of the archetypes were all one shadow, right? And that was your kind of like your ego identifying with the shadow of the archetypes, if that makes sense. But it's not as much your shadow, it's of the archetype, right? It's what I was trying to talk about is your ego is your grandiosity, right? And each one of the archetypes can make you act out in pathological, grandiose behavior, which is really clinical for just saying psychopathic immaturity. It's immaturity. It's uninitiated, right? So your infantile pathological grandiosity, when the magician gets hold of that, you become the manipulating trickster. It's just purely survival, A lot of people ask, what's the need? What's his role? What's the job, of the trickster? It's like, his job is to, like I was saying in the last video, because he's the trickster, he's the bullshit artist, he has the ability, he was given the ability to see through all the other bullshit and all the other tricksterism, right? That's his job. His job is to be able to recognize where there is true power or there is just another idealizing transference of power, and that the person is not actually the one that they say they are. They're just acting out, right? It's your bullshit indicator. But the hard part is, and then the funny part is that he tricks everyone around him, and he's able to manipulate his way through, judgment and criticism. But this is the thing about the infantile grandiosity. Once the archetype has the ego, there's no boundaries. The archetype doesn't know boundaries. It just keeps going until you go full psychotic or you're dead. There's no boundaries. There's no limits. So he tricks everybody, including the ego that he's controlling. You can't stop him. So he bullshits. He's able to see through everybody's bullshit, including your own tricksterism. So when I was talking about in the earlier video about my dream, he's in the subconscious, all the archetypes, right? So you see him whether you're conscious to him when you're awake or when you dream about them, And it's crazy because I remember saying in the dream that I knew it was me. I knew it was something with my ego, right? I think it was just the magician. Remember I was saying, if you watch the video on the Shadow Warrior, I think is the sadomasochist. I thought it was the sadistic laugh of the Shadow Warrior or the shadow of an archetype, but it was my magician laughing at me because I think I knew in the dream that I was trying to get somewhere, and I was working and I was trying to find maybe it was me first discovering Sakura kingship within me, trying to strive for understanding and trying to relate and stop identifying with and start identifying as, right? But the trickster in me was laughing. There's the magician tricking me, laughing at my attempts, because he's a trickster, he's the Joker, right? His job is to keep you in check, keep you in reality as well as everybody else, right? If you're, you're training and it's like your coach or some guru or your boss or a doctor, a pharmacist, someone you're consulting, a consultant, His job is to locate the other magicians to try and do the same thing. And depending on how well integrated he is, tamed he is, will determine how your vulnerability, to be taken advantage of by other tricksters, other shadow magicians. It's crazy. When I was listening to this in the lecture, I just started laughing because I remembered the dream, and I was like, he's the Joker laughing at you, Here you are in your full conscious grandiosity, and you're trying, and you're legit, and you're genuine, His job is to just sabotage, cut the legs off the charging stallion, and just throw him off the path completely. You know what I mean? Sabotage. He doesn't see it as sabotage. He just sees it as doing his job. That's his job. That's his essence, He is there and he knows why he is there. It's to put an end to all the bullshit that you see. You know, to make you aware of all the bullshit. You know, whether you're watching all these self-improvement gurus and coaches and business coaches and whoever it is, you know, he laughs at them. Like in your mind, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a lot of bullshit. You know what I'm talking about. You know, it's just your bullshit indicator. This is the archetype. This is the archetype of the magician. His job is to interpret and process and give you an answer, you know, on what he thinks the true meaning is. Interpretation. He knows the necessity of studying, right? But more importantly, he knows that there is a necessity of studying a certain knowledge that you need, right? And that's what makes you do it. That's what gives you the interest in studying a specific type of knowledge, right? The magician respects your own intellect, but it's subconsciously. So that doesn't mean you're respecting your own intellect consciously. It's like, you know, when you're listening to a debate or something and your ego is just biased, you know, and you're just confirming everything that you're listening to. You know you're disrespecting your own intellect, but your ego is more important, right? Not the magician. The magician knows the necessity to go and study and confirm and get the knowledge for yourself. But then, that's the thing. When he studies and he knows that he has the intellect, and he's gone that deep in the knowledge, and he knows that he has the answers that 90% of his viewers don't. Well, then if the king is not initiated there to keep him in check and to put him in order, then he's just going to become the trickster, the gatekeeper, right? I wouldn't say the black magician, but it's definitely the shadow magician. The black magician is going just further and further to the point where he's using the knowledge and the intellect to mislead and misguide, you know, like all of our spiritual leaders and elders, you know. I think most black magicians are the ones in control of the narrative of a religion, of every religion, you know. Because the reason why they're the black magicians is because they know the process of the mass of human beings' natural tendencies for idealizing transference, right? They're transferring their royal power to, you know, people of the past and scholars and teachers of the past, right, that are dead. And the only way to access the truth, information, the only way to access the only way how to become enlightened is by seeking their consultation, right? The Jews or the Christian bishops, all the Islamic scholars, you know, your muftis, your sheikhs, imams. They know the dependency of the people that come to them, and whether they do it consciously or unconsciously, they turn into, I mean, I don't know if I can say this, I probably can't, but it's the way they talked about it in a lecture. They become, see, a therapist doesn't have to be, a therapist isn't a psychologist or a therapist isn't a doctor. A therapist doesn't even have to be really scientific or medical. The therapist is the consultant, right? Your PT could be a therapist. Your work manager could be, your business partner could be the therapist, right? Anyone to manage your intellect and grandiosity, right? That's the magician. The archetype is the magician, right? There's no role. The therapist is the magician. He either becomes the therapist or you just separate it. The rapist. it's he knows the dependency. I mean, it's the definition, right? It's psychological and emotional rape. Because he knows the vulnerability of the person coming to him. He knows the vulnerability. So he has the power to control. So he can do whatever he wants. He can literally just take this person and just do whatever he wants with their mind, you know? It's beyond abuse. I mean, abuse is just like, what's the next stage then, you know? It's like, this is the terminology they give it. He become, you know, the therapist. If you just separate the words, it's psychological. There's psychological abuse and then there's psychological rape. And the magician, without having you know, the higher authority to be able to put him in order and subdue him, then he will do whatever he wants. He holds the keys, right? And why should he give them to the other archetype? Why should he approach the king so that the king can start building the kingdom, right? Or take the throne. I mean, if he doesn't, then all of these archetypes end up pushing the person to as close to the portal of integration as they can, which in most cases is pure psychosis. I mean, if you think about it, that's what psychosis is. It's unconscious, so it's an eternal state. Your unconscious, your subconscious is the eternal state, right? You either go into full permanent psychosis and you end up at the fucking institution. You're permanently you're physically and awake in another universe, or you're dead. They don't know the difference, but they don't care. I'll leave it at there. 33 minutes. I'll explain a bit more about the idealizing transference and the role of the tribal elders that the archetype recognizes, which is your parents, and how their failure to return the idealizing transference that you gave them as a child subconsciously, the failure and the damage that it does to the psyche. And pretty much leads to the first behaviors of psychopathology, even as a child. Not even a teenager. Yeah, most of us were psychopaths before we were teenagers. Most of us. I mean, over 50% of us were. Anyway, I'll leave it at there. Good luck to you. See you in the next one.